give it a few moments to get going because it seems to take a few moments now for some reason, which will give me an opportunity. Uh, Wrong link. Hello everyone. Sorry, I'm completely all over the place again. I'll click the button and shut up. Play the intro.
Just
Welcome to your awakening. Please take form as your reality is adjusted.
Welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Another edition of Sol Excalibre on this Moon Day evening. A minute or two late. On the star date 13th of the 7th, 2020. Yes, it is 2020. No matter how much craziness you think there is, it's supposedly the future now. So, yeah, the future turned out to be crazy. I thought about formatting this whole show as if we were talking, say, 8-9 months ago, and all of this craziness hadn't exactly been implemented yet. But we could talk the way we did a year or so ago and say, like, oh, they're going to do this kind of thing soon, they're going to do that kind of thing soon. And everybody, I say everybody, a lot of people would stand up and go, oh, you're just a tinfoil hatter. They'll never do that. They'll never get away with doing that. And then we fast forward to today and you look around, you go, well, they are actually doing it. They are getting away with it because people are going along with it. So, yeah, I thought about doing it that way, but then there's been a few little snippets building up the past couple of days. I thought, no, I'll mention some other stuff. I haven't exactly got a whole lot to say this evening. And I can't really say there's any kind of like major thread other than it's a continuation of what's been happening recently. The narrative has been continuously pumped despite the building counter push from a lot of the population. Because yes, more and more people are now starting to go, hang on a minute, that don't make any sense. What's going on here? More and more people are waking up, as the cheesy cliches go, or at least certainly rubbing the sleep out their eyes and starting to ask questions like, where am I? What's going on? Why all of a sudden have I got a nappy on my face? What's happening here? So, yeah, let's get into find my notes and say hello to everyone in the chat room. Hello, everyone in the chat room. That was a quick and easy way of doing it. Cardini, hello. Thanks for joining in. And Tazzy and Ridiculizer in the chat. And Neo Dog, hello. And Tazzy's in the room with us. And Ridiculizer is practicing his guitar work while he's listening and joining in the chat. Because he is a good guitarist, but even good guitarists have got to practice and learn new stuff. So, where am I? Reality Chat is in the room as well. Same as Society of the Spectacle. I'm scrolling down. Lynn Anderson, hello. And just Space Goat farts. Yes, hello. A lot of it is just Space Goat farts at the moment. The Rebel, hello, hello. And Stewie, hello. And Dottie, the artist formerly known as the non-violent extremist. And I think, right, yeah, scroll down to the bottom of the page so far. Hello, welcome everyone in the chat, and for all those just watching and not in the chat, and all the time travelers that will be watching the replay because they're not here live, and that's what else I was going to do. Remember to try sending the link to someone if they're there, if they're available this week, if they want to join in. Right, now I've remembered to do all that. I can get back to my notes and get on with it. Yeah, this week in Clown World, I've been thinking about doing a parody of the Gogglebox TV series, but involving politicians. This week in Parliament, Matt Wancock was talking a load of bullshit again. This week in the subtitle, I've just put "just talking" because, as I've said, I haven't exactly got any major thread to pull at other than the general narrative that's been happening. But one of what I could call like the sub-threads, subreddit, sub-thread, put in the subtitle as well. It says "Locker Rabbits," and in brackets bunnybola, sort of a tenuously interconnected storyline about supposedly now rabbits are having a new sort of outbreak or pandemic or something that they're guesstimating could be some kind of Ebola, some new rabbit Ebola. So it's bunnybola, bunny boiler, bunny bowler, Ebola. Yeah, they're playing weird scripting games with us. So they're playing stupid puns and word games. I don't know. Maybe, maybe that's just me making up stuff out of the various headlines. But there's another connection of why I put locker rabbits, because you've heard the classic cliche phrase of "follow the white rabbit," from the Lewis Carroll Alice in Wonderland storyline and all that kind of stuff. Follow the white rabbit. And more than once, many times over the years, I've talked about the concept of how the system itself, the agencies, the various institutions, groups like Tavistock, etc., will create rabbits. They'll create phantom rabbits, narratives that they release into the public mind, usually via the internet mostly at the moment, but through the use of cultural media, movies, TV programs, books, music, whatever. They put these ideas out there into the public consciousness. And people are encouraged to chase those rabbits. They're like a puzzle for your ego to chew upon, to give you something to do. But at the same time, they plant them like seeds to try and encourage your thinking to go in certain directions. And over the years, I've talked about ideas such as, this is going back several years now, things such as a lot of the questions and information and argument and debate over pieces of legislation or parts of the judicial system, the legislature, and how there were loopholes or holes in some of that legislation that could be pointed out. And for some people, potentially, they thought it would lead to certain escape routes or possibly something that you could use to benefit yourself against the system. And as I say, this is going back several years now, but it was things such as at one point, there was a group pushing the idea that if you wrote a letter in a certain format using certain worded phrases, certain legalese kind of language, and you address that letter to the Queen or the Queen's office, you could in effect get a permission slip to be free from the system. And at the time, I pointed out various problems with the idea. It's like asking permission from teacher to be set free. It's like getting a permission slip to be allowed to wander the corridors in between class time. And it doesn't really free you from the system. And at the same time, it validates the very system that you're supposedly complaining about and trying to escape, because you're using paper to fight paper, thereby justifying the power of paper. But in terms of the rabbit question, I pointed out how often the system will put out certain ideas into the public, and then they harvest the activity of the general populace that are interested in that question or idea. So in other words, they get us to find the holes in their legal fences or their constructs, their institutional constructs. They get us to be the rabbits released into the field to look for the holes in the fences, and then they just come along and fix up those holes. The same idea is done with other subjects and for other principles. So the concept that often referred to as the Pedageddon, the threat of the paedophiles is often used to distract from the very real and the information and evidence that demonstrates the institutionalized networks of people trafficking, child trafficking, paedophilia, abuse, etc. Instead, they put ideas out into the public to encourage them to, like a Pied Piper almost, but the rabbit is the thing that you're chasing. They allow a rabbit to be released into the public debate because they know it will drag off a certain amount of the public's attention. And while that group of the public is chasing after that rabbit, they're not actually looking at the main problem or the root cause of the problem, etc. A classic way of describing that is like the scapegoats or the sacrificial. I was going to say goats again. It's not exactly like a Judas goat, but it's the one they throw to the crowd. So I know I mentioned it a few times recently. The case of Jimmy Savile, how the public was expected to just ignore any potential connections of networks and other individuals that were linked back to Jimmy himself. No, it all started and ended with Jimmy, and now he's dead. You can all forget about it. That's the kind of giving a bone to the dog, giving the dog a bone. They know that people are interested in these kind of subjects, so they say, here you go, have this one, and then, ignore that it's all still carrying on, it's all still happening. So back up to date. Recently, over the weekend, a story, well, I don't know if it only started over the weekend, but that's when I started to see it coming up in the uploads and articles, etc. People talking about how it had been discovered that a company called Wayfair had been selling large metal cabinets that had 5 or 6 times the usual value price attached to them. And at the same time, they had very odd identification names, which started with a female name or a woman or girl's name at the beginning of the descriptive title of the item. So it was almost, subtly suggested that this cabinet box might have a body or somebody inside it. And then people, as they further investigated it, found that the names attached to these lockers, these metal lockers, was actually correlated to names of people that had been missing either recently or in the recent past. Some of those had been found again or, resurfaced again and turned out to not be missing, but others didn't. So there was this very, very odd connection between the names of these items available on their website and primarily girls and women. There was a few males as well, but people who have been missing recently. So that started to spread quite rapidly, and it got descended upon by a large demographic of the online public, the netizens, the people that have an interest in pursuing this kind of question, going, hang on a minute, what we're seeing here, is this child trafficking or people trafficking or something? What's going on? This is just weird connections. And connections that upon even a surface level of investigation seem to almost directly implicate and to indicate that, yes, there's some kind of underworld connection here or something nefarious happening, because it makes no sense whatsoever why these items had such a high price, and why would they have these names that connected to people who are actually missing, etc., etc., etc. But it became very much, as it developed over the weekend, I listened to a few different people talk about it and show information about it. This is starting to sound more and more like Pizzagate. Maybe we should call it Cabinetgate. Although that might confuse it with the stuff to do with Parliament. Lockergate. And then I was thinking, rabbits. They're giving people rabbits again. Lockers full of rabbits to chase. And then it turned out that I think it was the CEO or one of the top people at that Wayfair company had been in a photograph with Ghislaine Maxwell, who's the the current icon of discussion when it comes to the question of paedophilia, institutionalized paedophilia, networks of people trafficking, etc. That's an uncanny coincidence, isn't it? Yeah, how many coincidences does it take to make a conspiracy? I've asked that many times in the past. How many coincidences do you need? They're severely overpriced for what they are. They got these female names on them. The identification number of the items correlate to dubious photographs available via Russian websites and search engines. And the guy who used to work, one of the heads of the company, connects to Ghislaine Maxwell. It's, yeah, rabbits. Keep the public focused and to distract their attention away from any potential connections that lead to certain groups or individuals. It's like damage control. They're deliberately throwing this stuff in front of the public to give them a rabbit to chase that they know will either lead to a dead end, as in it will never culminate in any kind of serious investigation or prosecutions, or it's to drag them away from where the real root of the problem is and the connections from that root to other groups and individuals. There had been rumours about whether Ghislaine had made some kind of deal with the FBI and she might have given them information and made some kind of trade for that information, etc. And that could be why some of this is starting to come out. It could be damage control to cover up the misdirect from the information that she's handing over or that's being investigated. The whole thing just stinks. And it's reminiscent of the same kind of distraction narrative, damage control narrative that they did with Pizzagate. The situation around Pizzagate was heavily constructed. If there was any truth to people being trafficked via a pizza parlor in the basement of their pizza parlor, then it had long moved, the network had long since moved from that location and the location had been sanitized. So when any public investigators come looking, oh, lo and behold, it's empty and looks perfectly innocent. There's nothing to see here. Oh, it's all you crazy conspiracy theorists talking about pedophiles. Oh. So it suits perfectly well for the system to misdirect people and say, oh, nothing to see here, folks. No, it's not institutionalized networks. No, it's just these random individuals, these billionaires who could, if they wanted to, quite easily pursue their perversion without ever being noticed by the public. But no, they wanted you to know that he did this, that, and the other. Pushing him to the front to be sacrificed to make the public think that the problem had been dealt with and it's all gone away now and everything's okay. But be afraid of the random paedophile living in your neighborhood. So, rabbits in lockers and stories about rabbits getting Ebola. And the one thing that really just sort of, I know it sounds a bit of a odd connection, but it's just sometimes the way my mind works in kind of visual imagery. It's like Schrodinger's cat. Seeing these pictures on the website of these lockers with the prices on them and blah, 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 and you're looking at the locker and you think, is there somebody in there? And this is how they manipulate the ambiguity of a lack of evidence to allow people's own imagination to create the narrative for them. So they don't need to give you any direct indication of this is to do with people trafficking. They just suggest it. And the public's own fear will fill in the gap. And if they're desiring to discover information about paedophile networks and children being trafficked in weird ways, here you go, folks. Here's something for you to chew on and investigate that will never actually go anywhere. Nothing will come of it. And it's keeping you occupied for the next several months trying to figure out what this is. Just like they did with Pizzagate, and they're still pushing that bullshit now. There is genuinely some real information about networks that potentially connect to very powerful people and groups that are associated with what is commonly referred to as Pizzagate. But the narrative of what is called, labelled Pizzagate, was a construct deliberately created to feed into the public narrative so that it would distract and occupy people's time and attention. and give them a load of misinformation and disinformation. Direct them away from the actual networks that are in place and doing this kind of stuff. Perfectly suits as well the kind of methodology of the agencies, which would include Mossad, CIA, MI6, so all the crew will be there participating in this bullshit. It's not in any way difficult for agency operatives and the level of funding and influence that would be available to them to get a website, no matter who it is, what company it is or whatever, to have a section on it that hosted deliberately placed misdirecting information. So what I'm saying with that, what I'm pointing out is it would not be a problem for them to have faked that section of the Wayfair catalog, online catalog, and now the company has removed those pages. So any further investigation by the general public sort of hits that brick wall of, well, they're not actually there anymore for us to go and look at and try and trace the hyperlinks and stuff like that. They've just been removed. It's like gaslighting. Schrodinger's cat. Is there really a child in that locker, or is it just in your imagination? Are they dead when you open the locker, or are they still alive? What's going on here? But they're not really there anymore. You saw them, but then we took them away, and now we're denying that it ever happened. That's gaslighting. So they're gaslighting the public in that manner, frustrating all those people that have genuine concerns about the safety of young people, of children, etc. You know, they're worried about this whole people trafficking stuff that goes on in the world. They're gaslighting them terribly. They're psychologically abusing those very people that are trying to help the children that get trafficked. And the one, just sort of wrap it up with this, the one main point that stood out to me about the whole story, and was probably the first thing that made me start questioning, this looks like a psyop, very similar to Pizzagate, was the simple question of, well, why did nobody try buying one of the cabinets? I'm sure that for maybe, you know, the individuals out there that were looking at this information, that kind of money wouldn't be available to a lot of people. But there would be some media groups out there, some little collectives and things like that, that would have easily been able to have the money to say, well, let's see what happens when we buy one. We want to investigate this situation further. Let's click buy on that item and see what, you know, see what comes next. And if there really is a child, a kidnapped child in that locker, we're freeing them by buying this thing, and we can have proof, all the proof we would need to show to the public to say, look, this is what is happening. Look what happened when we bought this item. There was a child in this. Nobody. I didn't even see anyone ask that very question. Everybody's like, oh, look at this investigation. Look at these links, how they connect to Russia. And oh, look at this. Nobody turned around and said, well, hang on a minute. Why didn't anybody buy one to see what happened? Simple question. But no, the difference was, like I say, it was one of those things that made me start saying this is a psyop, because nobody's thought of just some simple questions to dig into this body of information. It's just instantly the next big sensation that gets shared around all over the place. Look at the rabbits run, chase them, chase those rabbits. Based on emotional cues. You are afraid and you are concerned about the welfare of children and the possibility that they're being sold on a website locked in a metal box. Emotional cues, emotional hooks, which is how they subvert the rational thinking, because your emotional mind, your emotional center develops earlier in the brain stem before you get to, you know, the brain curls like a shell. Yeah, I'll try not to distract myself talking about fractals. But the frontal lobe is like the latest development of our brain structure. And that's the frontal lobe is where you get your, what they call higher emotions, but really that's where you do all your rationalizing. That's where you do your monologue, sentience, self-discussion. You know, your thinking process mainly is how most people would comprehend it. The emotional brain, the emotional center, is further into the development, so it supersedes the rational thinking. And this is why, as we've often talked about on these shows and on the reality chats, you know, this is why they attack your emotional mind primarily. Because they know if they can key up an emotional response, either fear or anger, you know, lust, something that's very primordial and connected to your base drives, survival, and things like that, then it supersedes your rational thinking. Because in your brain stem, that emotional center supersedes the rational part of your brain processing primarily for most people. You know, that kind of neurological structure is not a hard and fast blueprint. You know, the parts of the brain operate in somewhat of a generalized sense for higher thinking and rational thinking, etc. But yeah, lots of rabbits and no simple questions being asked about supposedly metal lockers being occupied by children being trafficked. But there it is. Here you go, public. Is this new thing for you to be arguing about and investigating and sharing with each other, and you know, forget about all the other stuff going on. I don't want to say the same old cheesy cliche of it's just a distraction. I think that in and of itself has become a dismissal tactic where no matter the subject that gets brought up, I think I might have heard James Corbett sort of point this out a while ago. Yeah, no matter what subject's brought up, somebody will come along and go, oh, why are you talking about that? What else is happening? That thing you're mentioning is just a distraction. It's like, yeah, the donut on my table is a distraction. Let's not talk about that. No, it gets far too cliched and easily used as a dismissal tactic to try and say to people, like, oh, don't talk about that. Talk about what I want to talk about. So I'm in no way trying to suggest that people shouldn't look into those questions and the information about the company Wayfair and the just strangeness about the way it's labelled and the connections and stuff like that. Yeah, the more people who check it out, the more confirmations and information we'll get about whether there is anything genuinely there to be investigated. But don't let it become your raison d'etre that, you know, that's the meaning of life, the universe and everything, because there is a high possibility that the whole concept, the whole charade has been put in front of you to deliberately just drag you off talking about that, you know, chasing rabbits. But in a way, it connected me to something I wanted to do a screen share for. It's only a 5-minute or so video that I saw thanks to Kafka Winston Worlds, who shared it in one of her videos recently. And I thought it was so spot on. I thought, I've got to share that because he says, you know, the same kind of stuff we've been saying for months now, years possibly, some of it. But he says it clearly, simply, concisely in about a 5-minute video. And I thought that's a really good video for people if you want to, when you're talking to someone and you feel like, well, they still seem to be stuck in that dissonance of they can't quite realize the contradictions that are right in their face. They're still sort of trotting out the dogma of the system's propaganda. So here's a bunch of very simple observations and questions that will help you realize that what you're looking at are contradictions, outright blatant contradictions that make no good sense, no logical sense whatever, without having to resort to any scientific jargon or complex concepts of based on scientific data or anything. No, this is just some simple, rational, logical questions to help people spur their own critical thinking. So anyway, I'll shut up and I'll sort out screen sharing it and playing it. As I say, it's only about 5 minutes, approximately 5 minutes. I'll stick the link in the chat as well in a moment. So please do go and check it out for yourself. I've tried to, well, I've had a look at his his YouTube channel, and there's nothing on there apart from this one video, and there's not a lot of details on there, and the channel was only made up fairly recently, I think March this year. So I wonder about where this has come from. I don't know him, but I vaguely recognise his face from somewhere, but whatever. It's more the content of it that matters. I'm just pointing out to be aware of the context of where it's coming from and who's saying it and all that usual kind of good stuff. But anyway, I will shut up and play it and let you listen to it.
What we're actually seeing is the systematic implementation of the fall of the republic and the rise of the corporation of the United States. Every major event is a step in the ladder to achieve that end. COVID is just another rung in the ladder, which is why there's a deliberate mixing of all the wordplay, right? I mean, we should stop calling it, quarantine. That's a term designated for people that are verified sick. This is a house arrest mandated by the state. You should stop calling it, social distancing. There's nothing social about forced isolation. We should stop saying safer at home when millions of Americans don't have basic necessities adequate to fit their needs. It assumes that everybody's home is equally as safe as the people that are making the statements. We should stop saying, this is for the greater good, right? When you close the economy, killing millions of businesses that families have worked generations to establish, that's anything but good. We should stop saying this is the new normal. That's just blatant mind control drivel. There's nothing normal about forced isolation, treating your neighbor like they have the plague, breathing your own bodily waste, wearing masks, living in constant fear of contamination. That's normal. I mean, after all, if the virus is so deadly, why hasn't it wiped out the homeless who don't social distance, wash themselves regularly, let alone, live in or have access to a sterile environment? Last year, 1.5 million people died of tuberculosis. Why were you not wearing a mask during the tuberculosis pandemic? You were endangering, public health and safety along with billions of other people around the globe. So why didn't you wear a mask? I'll tell you why. Because the mainstream media didn't tell you to wear a mask, right? And so because though 1.5 million people died from tuberculosis, there was no tuberculosis pandemic any more than there's a coronavirus pandemic. What you're really participating in is a beta test for AI systems and facial recognition. See, these cameras work best when people are, distance apart. Now they're actually testing through machine learning how to recognize, a face that's partially covered. It's also a way to easily determine who's compliant and who's not. Who does the propaganda work on and who it doesn't? Now get this, there's some ironies that are here, right? A society that kills millions of babies a year for convenience has shut itself down to prevent adults from dying. People that on the one hand slaughter babies in the womb by the millions are now preaching to the masses about the sanctity of human life. It's double speak, double talk. It's the two doctrine policy, one for the initiated, one for the uninitiated, one for the inner circle, another for the masses. It's like saying, if I violate the stay-at-home order, I can be arrested, but you're letting convicted criminals out of prison so they don't get coronavirus. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. If there's a real pandemic, does it require, faulty virus models, rigged test results, 81% false positives, inaccurate news reporting, staged hospital overruns, manipulated death certificates? Nope. When the government shuts down, millions of small businesses, but doesn't lay off any government employees, it's not about the health. When the state bans dentists from practicing, but deems it necessary for abortion clinics to stay open, it's not about your health. When the state prevents you from buying seeds for your garden, but allows you to purchase lottery tickets, it's not about your health. An institution that, has the ability to destroy all of Earth through, alleged nuclear warfare should not regulate personal self-defense. An institution that's caught trafficking drugs shouldn't be able to regulate plants. An institution that's racked up $23 trillion prior to coronavirus in debt shouldn't be allowed to manage the retirement fund. An institution that was caught spreading STDs should not be allowed to run healthcare. If people are really concerned about public health and safety, in general, but they don't care if people eat garbage, drink poison, smoke cancer, and take prescription drugs, but think that toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and masks are going to protect them from the boogeyman coronavirus. This is a special kind of stupid that I can't address here. You should ask yourself a couple basic questions. When did you consent from you creating a government to serve you to you serving the government ruling over you? If you want to know, who's in charge, just think about who you can and can't criticize.
Yeah, like I said, just some simple but on-point questions to help elicit a bit of critical thinking. Well, so it's still screen sharing, supposedly. Stop the screen sharing. Right, thank you. To elicit a bit of critical thinking, and done in a way where they're just simple questions. They don't require any specific scientific knowledge or information or access to a lab or anything like that. It's just some simple questions about, look at the complete contradictions of the things that you're being asked to do or told to do, or it's been suggested as guidelines, but then what they call guidelines are becoming implemented by various corporate groups, such that, well, it is a requirement, isn't it? Yeah. The government's saying guidelines, but the shop, when I try and go in it, is saying you must wear a mask. So is it a guideline or is it a demand, a requirement? What's going on here? And we're far beyond the question of the mortality level of COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. I'll say it another twice. COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. Just in case the algorithm missed it, which is something I'll mention again in a minute. But you were asking in the chat, Dinny was asking, can I play or share the Vernon Coleman latest one, which I can do. I haven't seen it myself yet because he uploaded it, I think, not long before setting up to start the show tonight, so I haven't actually seen that one yet. But it's another 11 minutes, so maybe I can show it. I'm just thinking more about the time consumption. Maybe I'll do the rest of my little rambling that I wanted to do, and then I'll play it. That way I know I can. It'll help encourage me to wrap up and get on with it. But yeah, thanks. In the chat, hello, Road Penguin Scotland as well. I'm seeing you sneaking in the chat. I'm having a quick scroll up. See, it says P Murph, hello, and Steve Tagoose, hello, and Krishna, hello. Thanks for joining in the chat. If I can scroll back, not all the way, but far enough. I think I've said hello so far to everyone. Sorry if I have missed you out while I'm scrolling through quick. Yeah, okay, let me get my notes. Made in UK, PLC, hello. Grab my notes back again so I can see the other bit I wanted to mention, which is connected into that. People going along with wearing masks and going along with the guidelines. And I know, as I say, there is that consideration that in certain places you're being told it's a requirement, it's a have to, not a, oh, if you want to, mate. No, you're not allowed in the shop unless you're wearing a mask. You're not allowed on the bus unless you're wearing a mask. All that kind of shit is happening. Even though the government is using the plausible deniability of saying, oh, well, we haven't actually legislated yet, but we're just suggesting guidelines to you. And I think it was Goethe, UK column was quoting him as talking about how at the moment it's voluntary. We're just suggesting it to you that we would like you to go along with this. And then in the near future, as Bojo put it, they'll start mandating it. They will start writing legislation for it. They've probably already got the legislation on the shelf ready to go to be implemented and pass through Parliament. And this is why they are generating the consent in the populace by encouraging you to think that it's already mandatory. So you all start doing it. You all start agreeing and going along with it because, the shops require it, the pub requires it, the public transport requires it, etc., etc., etc. And from that general acquiescence, the government will then claim consent has been given, therefore we can now be justified in stamping legislation to mandate it. It's all about manipulation of people psychologically to make them think they have a choice when clearly it's intended that they don't have a choice. And at the same time, I think I talked about this the other week with the 1+ good about Bojo and his 1+ meter distance. The government are keeping plausible deniability on their side. So if you choose to, you can en masse just ignore all their guidelines, and what they're going to do about it, legally or lawfully, what are they going to do about it? At the moment, they're concentrating on a combination of persuading people to be afraid of the number of cases because the mortality rate has dropped so low that it's negligible, it's less than the flu. So they're trying to convince people that now the thing to be afraid of is how many people are infected. Oh, look at how many people are infected. And it's like, well, yeah, they're infected and they're surviving more than they do from the general flu. And we don't shut the world down because of the flu. Just some simple questioning and thinking, simple, rational, logical investigation of the contradictions. But recently, over last week, there was an outright riot in Serbia when Serbia tried to claim that there is a new outbreak, a new spike of the second wave, and they wanted to implement a full-on lockdown again. And some of the media is calling it in rioting. I'm sure there would have been some rioting, but I think you'll find the majority of the people there were trying to peacefully protest, to be non-compliant, to use peaceful non-compliant to show the government that, like, no, we don't agree with this, we're not going along with it, you better stop talking bullshit. And the government backed down. Whether they stick to that is obviously yet to be seen in the near future. But the government did back down because the people gathered in mass and said, no, fuck off, you ain't doing that to us again. You got away with your bullshit once, you're not getting away with it again. And as I've said so many times over the years on these shows, I'm not talking about trying to attack the system with some kind of use of violent force. It doesn't work like that. Peaceful non-compliance, ignoring their bullshit, ignoring their suggestions, using your own cognizance and authority to think for yourself and say, well, I'm not at risk. I'm a healthy person. I've got a good immune system. I'm out and about all day, mixing with people every day. So I don't need to follow their guidelines. The risk to me is completely negligible. I'm more likely to be struck and killed by lightning than I am to catch this thing and die from it. Or if you are somewhat susceptible, to decide for yourself, well, actually, I am at a bit of a risk, so I will be a bit more careful than I would be normally. Just the same as you would in flu season. So if you're somebody who has some kind of condition or illness, or you're elderly, a weak immune system, stuff like that, you would have a bit more consideration to care for yourself during the height of flu season. You don't want to get the flu because it could be devastating to you. But you don't force the world to shut down because of that. You moderate your own risk and your own involvement with the rest of society, other people, potential risk factors, etc. But no, they're still pushing the lie that we have to have lockdowns. Now, as I've talked about a lot recently, the localized lockdowns, the regional lockdowns. Now in Scotland, you are required to wear a mask in certain places. And they're rumouring about having control over people crossing the border so they can check you, quarantine you if they feel they need to, as you're trying to get across from England to Scotland or Northern Ireland to Scotland, etc. I think they were also talking about doing the same thing in Ireland now, where they're talking about starting the lockdown all over again and quarantining people coming in and out of the country. The narrative has carried on. They've just switched from talking about the number of deaths to now talking about the number of cases. But the lie is continuing. They cannot drop the lie. They keep pushing it unless the public en masse, like in Serbia, turn around and say, no, we're not having any more of this. This is, no, done with you. Done with your bullshit. Stop trying to destroy our country, destroy our economy, destroy people's lives through this bullshit that is clearly no risk to us, because even your own science shows it, according to the CDC, to be 0.26%. And I know I mentioned that a few weeks ago. So that information is a good few weeks old now. And yet still the mainstream media carries on with the narrative lie. That little chunk, that little snippet of info is just lost in the maelstrom. The noise, the social peer pressure of, you're a bad person if you don't acquiesce to wearing the mask, the face nappy. So we're building up now to the second wave here in the UK. They had reopened the pubs, but already they're now talking about bringing in more restrictions. I've heard from a few people about how the kind of pub experience is not the pub experience anymore, which I think, somewhat was expected from what they've been saying about how they were going to approach this kind of stuff. I know people was, not exactly under the illusion that it was going to be back to normality, as it used to be called. But even so, they're already starting to apply the narrative pressure of, because people don't know how to social distance when they're drunk and they're not wearing masks and they're being all naughty and defiant, that they'll have to introduce lockdowns again. And as I pointed out, this localizing of lockdowns gives them the ability to just, like a pop-up shop, they do it wherever they feel they need to, wherever there's a bunch of people getting a bit too uppity for themselves and starting to think a bit too much about obedience and tyrants and dictatorial powers and martial law and all these kind of questions and discussions. We'll say there's a spike in that area and we'll lock them down and they can all be locked away under quarantine. It's not quarantine. So that's why I put just talking without a mask in the comment box. It is unfortunately still at the point where the media is not going to come clean because they're totally in the pocket of the powers that think they be. The BBC certainly is just a mouthpiece for the system in the UK, the governmental establishment, aristocracy, whatever you want to call it. So they're not going to change the tune, and the tune is carrying on like the organ grinder. So it's down to whether people in general start non-complying, start disobeying, start taking the risk into their own hands and making their own choices and decisions via their own authority, their own authorship. I'm not talking about breaking the law, because as I've been particular about constantly stressing and constantly repeating, there is currently no legislation in place that requires you, that mandates you to wear a vaccine, to get a vaccine or wear a mask or to socially distance. There is nothing yet in place. But the government keeps adding that little statement at the end of every official statement of like, oh, well, yeah, it's voluntary for now, but we might mandate it soon. So they're prepping the public consciousness. If the public goes along with the suggestions, they'll go, oh, yeah, they're in for it. Right, okay, boom, there you go. There's the legislation, folks. Now it is mandated. So the more you go along with it, the more justification they're giving you, that you are giving them. and I'm just reiterating a point that I've been banging on a lot recently, they're banging the same tub. It's down to the mass of the populace to realise that the contradictions to the official narrative are so vast, and the outright indication of a tyrannical structure that is waiting to be implemented based on the social justification by people going along with the suggestions, etc., etc. If you can't see that and realise you need to make a choice and draw a line, then you're not going to see any change to the progression of the narrative and the implementation of those agendas to mandate a lot of this stuff. And if you want to get back to normal and avoid the abnormal that they're trying to create, then you have to draw that line for yourself. Do it with awareness. Consider the potential ramifications and consequences of any actions you might take, and make that decision. If you feel you can't, for whatever reason, that you need to, put on the mask so you can go in a particular shop or something like that, that's your decision to make. But the more that people just go along with it because the government suggests it, the worse it's going to get. We're not even into the beginning of autumn. The harvest season is going to be upon us soon, and they are probably going to push a lot harder on this second wave bullshit. So you're at the point of the top of the roller coaster ride. You can get off now if you want, or you can wait and see how far down they're going to push this, because they're not giving up on the lie. That's apparent from the constant media output, where they are literally just ignoring the evidence and the information that's been building up, the statistical information based on all the testing they've been doing that just contradicts their own arguments and narrative. They're just ignoring it. They're gaslighting the public. They're saying, oh no, that never existed. Forget about that. We may have told you last year to not wear masks, but now this year we're telling you to wear masks. Forget about it. No, that never happened. Forget about it. No, that's not real. Talking about, putting out the fact checkers to debunk the legal statement on the packaging of those masks saying this will not work to protect you against COVID. But the fact checkers that's pushed forward to say, oh, well, that's been misinterpreted. It's like, no, it's not. The company that put that warning label on the side of their product would have consulted lawyers to make sure they were wording it correctly and getting it right and indemnifying themselves from liability and prosecution because you get an illness because the mask was never intended to protect you from certain illnesses, because that's not what it's meant for. But forget about that, because the fact checkers told you that you're just too dumb to figure out that. You're too dumb to have any critical thinking or ability to ask questions. No. Just obey. Just put on the Crown obedience verification device on your face and prove that you've done exactly what they want you to do, and you've shut up. Because that's what that muzzle represents. Shut up, stop questioning, just get on with what we tell you to do. They say jump, you say how high? Do I need to pat my belly and rub my head at the same time? Put one foot in a bucket of cold water just to save myself from the imaginary danger that's coming to get us. Anyway, I've ranted enough about the usual kind of subjects that I get stuck on. But thanks for tuning in, folks. Is there anything anyone wants to jump in on? Or
yeah, well, Cookie, I was going to say tacit consent. I heard that's mentioned before. Where people, you're not saying no enough. You need to say it. No, it's not just by doing nothing. Doesn't tell them anything. It just means, oh well, that's being understood, and off we go. We'll just carry on. And that's the problem. So I know if Gary wants to say anything. I don't know how long Gary's got left.
This is why, as well, I said at the beginning, I thought about sort of formatting this particular episode as if we were talking 6, 7, 8 months ago. Back then, we would have said, like, this is coming. They're going to try and make you do this. And most people would have been, nah, they'll never do that. And there was 6 months down the line, Certainly 4 months from when they said, "Oh, it's just going to be 3 weeks, folks, and then it's only temporary, and then we'll stop the lockdown." And it's multiple months since then.
Yeah. And then they're running other stories now, I've noticed, about bubonic plague in Mongolia, for fuck's sake.
And in the bunny rabbits, Remember the clip of Bill and Melinda, Bill and his husband Melinda, smirking when he was talking about the second pandemic. And then in less than a week, the media starts running stories about Ebola outbreaks. You wonder what conspiracy. Call me a conspiracy theorist? Fuck off, you idiot.
And this suits the agenda for basically people, because they're not, again, you have to say no. What people will tend to do, though, is just go online. They'll just go, I ain't going shopping anymore. I ain't going through that shit. We just order stuff on the internet. I can't be bothered with that bullshit. And that's the problem. It's not that, so they'll just assume, well, that's how it'll go. Everything will move over. High street will just slowly just die off. Just left with corporate symbols. And that will be it.
Listening to
if we don't say no.
Well, why don't people say no? This is it's called Report Extra, and this is the book that was written by this guy. It's a French name. They make so much Goethe. Antoine Goethe.
Explaining how you're supposed to pronounce it, right?
And now I can't remember. If you just shut up, I lived in France, I would have been able to say it. But anyway, the guy is saying, why do people put up with this tyranny? Like, is it cowardice, or is it just they become accustomed to it and they just go along with it? And it's just an interesting insights in this one. What I've noticed though here is that the church where I beg every Sunday, a lot less people turning up. Now, when the COVID thing first came out, they were using. When the COVID thing first came out, I mean, they were doing all the church services on television. Go to this YouTube channel, go that one, and I'm wondering how they got the bread and wine to the people. Maybe they're using a Deliveroo, or a Glovo. Going on their mopeds, They've transformed the fucking Christian church service into a fucking Just Eat experience, But anyway. I've got to go in a bit, but this is really worth watching. This guy was saying the things what we're saying now, and even then in those days, with the kind of tyranny you used to have under kings and that, it's only because people agree with it and go along with it. But then why do they? That is the real question, isn't it? And
he described what he's in a modern vernacular referred to as compartmentalization. There's the king. Then there's the 6 people around him, or the average 5 or 6 advisors. And then each of those advisors has like 600 people under their command. And they're all compartmentalized in a structure where, based on the liberties and benefits they get from those given above, that encourages them to go along with the dictates of the one above them. You do this and I'll give you a portion of the tax money that we collect and stuff like that. Demonstrates how one individual, who as he describes it in the way they're talking about the writing, as somebody of weak and bad nature, who's not even capable of fighting in a fight or having sex with a woman and stuff like that. Somebody like Bill Gates can control so many people and cause their dictates to influence the lives of entire populations of a country, etc.
And that was in the days when they didn't have mainstream media. All they had was the village post with maybe a bit of news and gossip.
And a large amount of the population were completely illiterate. So he was speaking to other educated people. So the demographic he was speaking to is quite a small demographic at the time, contemporarily.
You had the old-fashioned town crier, didn't you? Back in, when before radio and stuff.
Then a rumour and some gossip among a group of peasants could easily get out of hand, but it rarely did, because they'd rather stay with the misery they have than take a chance where it could get worse.
And it rarely left the village. Most people who lived during that time, they didn't travel very far in their entire lives. You know, if somebody said they'd been 10 miles from one village to another, that would have been considered a traveller.
And
or a
wandering.
trader or something like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the time 500 years ago, people were just about allowed to travel from town to town, because in the 12th, 13th century, you weren't even allowed to travel out of the village.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
that's how the
surprised.
Freemasons became free.
I was surprised that I know they were sort of talking about that one book and that author, but I was surprised that they didn't make mention of Machiavelli and the Prince, The Prince, because that's all contemporary to the same timeline. And they're talking about different subject, or the same subject from different perspectives. So Goethe was talking about how that kind of tyranny is abhorrent and why do people succumb to it, and the kind of psychology long before the terminology psychology came along, yeah, talking about why people follow tyrants. And then Machiavelli was putting out the same kind of information, but from the other side of the fence, saying people need to be told what to do. This is how you manipulate them. This is how you control them. This is what we as people in power should be doing to everybody else.
A good picture of that was that king who went on crusade. I don't know which one it was now exactly, but while he was out in Jerusalem or something somewhere, he caught leprosy, and he remained their king while he literally rotted to death. And they used to carry him around on a palanquin, and he literally died one day, during the march, almost like he was carrying this dead body that was like bits dropping off of it because of their, they're all dependent on that figurehead. They're all, like you say, the servants and the lackeys, and so yeah,
the whole structure falls apart without that pinnacle.
Yeah, and when the pinnacle is a guy who's literally rotted to death for fucking leprosy, they're still there carrying it, man, reverencing it, yeah, because it's the symbol of their own, parasitism.
I think it'd be more clear or more accurate to say that the structure itself doesn't necessarily fall apart as soon as the head of the snake is removed. It's just by removing the head of the snake, you give all the people who are in that structure the opportunity to move away from the structure. But they can, by choice, perpetuate it by putting a new head on the throne, which is what, again, Goethe is talking about. It's like people follow that kind of tyranny, not necessarily because of anything like cowardice. They do it out of a desire to benefit for themselves in the long run, is what it concludes to, yeah? And they're willing to allow the other individuals within the structure to be suffering a detriment so that they gain a benefit. So when the guy above them says, well, if you do what I order you to, you'll get, your share of the biscuits. But fuck everyone else. They'll get no biscuits because I'm giving them to you because you're following the orders.
I haven't watched all of the video yet. I was about halfway through it, and I was just beginning to touch on the bit where politicians actually try to make themselves, as well as having this power that they don't really have, they try to make themselves into gods, celebrities. And I was thinking that series I watched last autumn or whatever, on Henry VIII, and the way that he was king because God had chosen him to be king. And that's what they're trying to reenact. They're trying to give their position a bit of like divinity. Yeah. So becoming a celebrity does that almost. Yeah. It's the modern day equivalent of saying, I was chosen by God. Look at me on television. I look so good. Yeah. It's
the Church of Merlin.
Sad.
Yeah. But when you see behind it though, when you think, they're just bigging up the image because they're trying to connect with that ancient memory of God placed these leaders to be our leaders. All that smiling on television, all the celebrity, Trump going to the World Wrestling thing and doing this little thing by shaving somebody's head. He's making himself appear like, this divine authority kind of thing. Yeah, it's the modern equivalent of it.
Deifying themselves by the church of the media.
Yeah.
They do. I think I mentioned it before we started live. I thought about it as like the three rings of the circus, like there used to be the 3-ring circus, one of the rings will be things that are dangerous, like the lions, the tigers, that kind of stuff, or the high wire trapeze acts. Something that has an element of threat or danger to the audience. So that's the fear manipulation, the threat of war or the actual war, etc. And then you have the ring of entertainment, which is all kind of like the distractions, the clowns, the outright entertainers that just feed you distraction constantly. And then the last ring is the celebrity personalities, the icons. And that, in a modern sense, includes politicians who turn themselves into a new style of celebrity.
Yeah.
It's like how have we in this age got celebrity news readers? They're not investigative journalists. So they're not somebody like, say, John Pilger, who's got a track record of investigative journalism that sort of gives him a level of kudos. So he's almost like a celebrity, almost kind of rock starish personality, the way he's presented. But a news reader, somebody who just appears every day reading from a teleprompter, yet they're treated like they're celebrities. For what? They're a face that reads out something, a text of something. That is the level of deification that they do via the media and the politicians.
Do you remember? Do you remember that Dutch hacker, that young kid who hacked into the Dutch newsfeed? Yeah, and he rewrote their script, and it's got the two newsreaders there. It was called Max. Yeah, Max the hacker. I mean, it was when the iPhones first came out, and you could. Well, he was doing hacks with an iPhone. You could hack a car and get its lights to come on and the engine to start. And he was hacking things like automatic bridges, because he had the little infrared signal. Yeah, he could find out what signals were. Well, he went into the Dutch television news teleprompter and wrote in his own story. And you can see from that, this woman's reading out a story, and it's an absolutely ridiculous story made up about the price of fish at the local fish market. And then he starts speeding up the teleprompter, and she's going faster and faster. But she's trying to keep her cool. This is how connected they are with what they're fucking reading out. Whether it's true or false makes no difference. They're just there for their appearance and their tone of voice. It's an act in itself. Yeah.
And I just say we need these, or people seem to need these people to put on pedestals. Like I say, that it's all part of that, isn't it? Putting people into deification and putting them there and look at them and give them a knighthood as well. Give them a load of titles to, sir, whatever newsreader you were. I can't remember the one who got a sir, but there's been a few actually. But that's what they do. Yeah, they do it throughout all of the industry.
The black guy off ITV. Trevor
McDonald, yeah, him. McDonald, we should say, but yeah, McDonald was the.
Are you saying about the journalists? I said that the newsreaders are just actors, but with journalists and investigative journalists, it's all about the music of language. You see, and that's how it is. Ding. They give you that, tone of voice of "I just told you something." Now you realise it.
It's true.
The emotion is there, to keep people tipping along. But we need to mimic these people's voices more. You need to, because they're old tricks that they've been taught. Yeah, when you explain something, raise your voice at the end, and it will sound like it's true. It will sound like you're telling them something they've never heard before. And a lot of them are tricks, and it could help break it down a lot if we could explain it better.
Yeah, but I think that our audience that's listening to this is a bit older than like 3 years old. Like that's the way that they do speak to the audience. It's like, now listen here, boys and girls. I'm going to tell you a story. Like that.
Now put your mask on.
Yes. Now put on your mask.
Listen to one of his statements. Yeah. And you hear that kind of storytelling oration. His style of presentation is like you're in a library listening to him reading out a story to the kids.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, and the other thing that I have noticed, if you look at any of the mainstream articles or anything like that, and you're looking at it purely from a visual point of view, that like you said, all the stars, they're all wearing masks. You know, everything that you're looking at a queue of people that are supposed to be queuing up to vote. I'm assuming that it's coming up. They're all spaced apart, socially distanced. They're all wearing their masks. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like installing that. Oh, right, okay. So that's what I've got to look like. That's what I've got to do. That's what I've got to wear. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Last couple of days, I've gone to some Yahoo stories that have just been so fucking ridiculous. All I've done is gone into the comments and said, does anybody actually fucking believe in this shit? I mean, the guy who went to a party in Texas because he didn't believe the coronavirus exists, he managed to get back to Florida, into the hospital. He's on his deathbed with his last gasp. I think I made a mistake. What a headline. Man, it's all made up. It's terrible, man.
It's like the Daily Mail here, isn't it? The headlines from that thing every day. Jesus.
Yeah. I see you, yeah.
I was going to mention.
Oh, he's gone.
Gary. Thanks
Cheers,
for
Gary.
joining.
See you, Gary.
I was going to mention it earlier. I caught that guy Scott Webb's latest video from this afternoon, and he was pointing at a Daily Mail article talking about the government rumouring about banning smoking outside of pubs.
That's right, yeah.
Which is why I sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier. You know, they've allowed a certain amount of people. Well, they've allowed us out again now to go to the pubs.
Outside.
All these stupid restrictions or guidelines on the pubs, and the companies are going along with the guidelines, and that's not far enough. They're now talking about preventing you from smoking outside, and I agree with Scott on this, on his observations. The primary reason for that is because they don't want people gathering and talking with each other. Yeah. Because usually what happens, and I saw it here over the weekend when they first started opening the pubs again, is outside the pub you've got a little gaggle of people who've all come out to have a smoke, and they're all chatting away. Yeah, they're not under the restrictions that are inside the pub where they have to be separated so they can't talk amongst themselves. No, they're all just stood in the street chatting. Yeah, that is another indication that this is nothing to do with protecting your health. Yeah.
And what about all the cars that are driving past you when you're having your tea, you fucking daft twats? You know what I'm saying? It's like getting all that lovely smoke off the exhaust into your lungs, and honestly, yeah, go on, Cookie.
They're talking about the secondary smoke argument again, yeah, in the open air. So to me, it's equivalent if you stand in a field, you know, is somebody near you going to be getting your secondary smoke and all that kind of bullshit argument.
That's why I've never quite understood why they have like separate smoking areas. What, like the air is any different over there than it is over there? Yeah,
you're outside, and they're polluting this planet in a massive way, and us doing a little smoke outside is contributing absolutely naught to it at all. It's a joke. It's just another way of shutting down your freedom of doing what you want to do outside. Even outside now, I mean, you know, I know in certain parts of the US you can't smoke outdoors, isn't it? Certain states, they've done that. So again, it's just going, you know, all over. And I think we're going to see, like I say, with this.
Laughable, and I have to have a bitch and whine about it.
Well, you have to let it go, innit?
It's just me, you know. I just can't keep my gob shut.
But I mean, I've had again this week going into shops or going into a charity shop, and you know, you must wash your hands. I said, no, I'm not washing my hands, and we just left in the end.
I just say I'm allergic to it.
I said that. I said dermatitis, and he said, I've got some gloves. I said, well, that make it worse because my hands are sweating gloves. Yeah. So you obviously don't know what that condition is, do you? And you didn't know what to do, and we just left. So
if there's anything already on the surface of your skin, and you then put gloves on, like the face nappy, it then traps it against your skin.
Yeah.
So it's going to amplify the absorption into your skin.
Yeah. And interesting, I heard someone says that if you wear a mask and you do have access to a pulse oximeter, if you know what one of those are, it's a little device that goes on the end of your finger clip, and it tells you your oxygen levels in your blood, which is normally
Yes.
about 98% or something in most healthy people. And apparently, if you put a mask on and for a minute or two, do a little, if you got one of them, put it on and see what your oxygen levels are, they'll have dropped.
Yes.
So, that's, again,
There's
people aren't realizing this. And these masks I'm seeing people wearing, wow, they're pretty heavy duty, some of them. They're really full on, really covering everything. And I'm thinking, wow.
face coverings.
Yeah, no, they're no
Again,
good, man.
We're in that kind of ambiguous language deliberately, to confuse people and to allow ambiguity for the government to play with. But what most people are opting for is those ones that come under the chin and up over the nose, and it's like solid all the way up the side. It's usually made of like a cloth material. And I know a lot of the kind of fashion brands have jumped on producing these things. So they're being branded, they're being trendified, they'll be sold on a fashion label sale pitch. And that's probably kind of the worst that you could be wearing. And when people are being told or expected to wear them near enough constantly, in some places, I think it goes back again to the USA, some of the propaganda in the USA recently. They're even trying to suggest that you wear them all the time, even when you're at home alone.
Good luck with that.
It's just like,
ain't gonna happen. Breathing is essential.
These were supposedly experts, It's like
Idiot.
Death spurts, more like.
Yeah.
We're back into the insane, crazy clown world kind of shit. The outright contradictions and just 180 to actual evidence and science and rationality is just being stated blatantly as if it's the new doctrine of the world.
Well, I think that that if they really gonna make a thing about wearing a mask, I reckon that we should bring Halloween forward and go out and get the most grossest mask that you could possibly find and go back to same said store and go, I've got a mask. There you go. What can they say?
I still prefer,
you know what I mean?
I still prefer my idea of wearing knickers on your head.
There is that. Yeah.
I might get some and wear them for several days and then put them on and go, there you go, I'm wearing a mask. Probably be the easiest way to get kicked out of a shop, but
They have security now, don't they, enforcing it or trying to.
That's hilarious. What is the security for? To stop stop COVID getting in the shop?
It's like telling you what to do again. It's like, don't tell me what to do. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, how dare they? How dare they? Tell you what to do when you're out,
The local supermarket, because there's two entrances to the local one by me, and they've got little radios.
Go in the wrong door as well.
Yeah, and they tell each other like how many people they're doing a people count. Another one in, another one out. So at some point they must sit there and go, I blocked the COVID. I'm telling the COVID to go away. No COVID allowed in the shop. So what exactly are you doing, mate?
It's ridiculous. I went in counted in a shop the other day, and there was more staff than people in a queue outside. That makes no sense.
Oh, they're essential workers now,
Oh, is that what they're called now?
Yeah, that's a two-tier society. Your job wasn't essential, but their job is.
Of course.
Even though they're not getting paid any extra, their job is essential.
Yeah, I'll either that or just write on there obey or do I look dumb wearing this or make up your own. Have fun with it, but get people thinking. Don't just all right, okay, I'll give in. No, make a statement about it if you're gonna.
So you won't be allowed in the shops now. Once I think it's in Wales in the next few weeks, they're going to introduce that mandatory in shops like they've done in England.
Just make sure it's got big holes in it. So that that you're not going to hinder your own breathing. It's
already traumatic enough going into the local supermarket anyway. And do you know what? It's just like, I've got to finding ways not to ever go there ever again, but not order online, if you know what I mean, or come up with some other way. Local shops, that kind of thing, but get them to stock half decent food. Go in and say, look, I'll come here every week and get some stuff that I like.
I would say that go on to the shop's website to see whether that they offer any kind of exemption on there. That basically the they're putting their own needs above yours. You know, like, and if
Mm.
they're supposed to be offering a service, then
Yeah.
it, you know, like, it should be a two-way thing, not just like, well, if you're going to come in here, you got to do what I do, you know, and then next week we're going to say you have to wear clown feet, like you were saying last week. You know, where does it end? Well, if you come in the shop this week, you've got to hop on one leg round the store. Yeah, it's just utter ridiculousness. You know, where does it end?
Yeah, and then they won't take cash when you get to pay, and then you say, "Well,
They
I'm
have
going to
to.
give you kids cash, and I'm just going to walk out," and then you can't even get prosecuted because you've offered to pay.
Yeah, they have
So
to.
they're refusing your payment. That's their problem. They don't want your payment. I'll take your goods. Terror.
Yeah,
You know?
it's illegal. It's illegal for them to refuse cash. They
Yeah.
prefer card. If you see the signs, card preferred, but they cannot say card only, because
Yeah.
that's illegal. You start taking names, and then get onto the Bank of England and get their trading license revoked. So
Yeah. They're refusing legal tender for payment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put a get a string vest mask.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it weeks ago about to make them more attractive to the general public. They need to sex them up a bit. So why don't they make fishnet masks? I don't know if you remember me suggesting that. And then probably a couple of weeks ago, I saw pictures of a couple of women walking around with fishnet masks on. It was like, yes.
Lion Shares just said it may come under the Coinage Act of 1971. Yeah, they cannot refuse.
They're not allowed to refuse legal tender.
Yeah.
I
So
know
again,
they'll claim that they're allowed to refuse service to anyone they choose to because it's a private business and they can approach the argument from that direction. So I'm not suggesting that you're going to have any great success if you try and make this argument in the middle of a shop to the cashier behind the counter or whatever.
You could in a restaurant when you've had your dinner.
Yeah.
Because you've already had it. And say, I'm not refusing to pay. I'm giving you that.
Yeah. Put it on the table. You say, there's the cash, mate. Bye.
Yeah. See you later.
Yeah.
And then do a big burp as you go out. Burp. And then fuck off.
Or
And then if you get arrested, you'll win your case because you've not refused to pay. And you'll do them for false arrest as well. And you'll win that one too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Denny would probably leave them a complimentary fart on the way out.
It depends what you've eaten.
This is how much I enjoyed your meal. Thank you. Now, I wanted to mention as well, I did put it in my notes and I sort of hinted at it when I was rambling earlier. Recently, there's been another upsurge of the YouTube purge. Maybe I should say GooTube because it's Google, isn't it? The alphabet company that is primarily the foundation of all this platform that is YouTube now. And they've been getting rid of some of the bigger channels out there. Stefan Molyneux got shut down. And now recently he's also been pushed off Twitter, which is sort of like, I don't agree with quite a lot of the stuff he says, but I don't agree with him being just outright banned and shut down and all that kind of shit. And then recently, Max Egan had the Crow House channel shut down, or he had YouTube shut it down. I know he's still got his original AOD Scarecrow channel because I'm still subscribed to that, and he has recently been uploading to that channel instead. But the channel that most people have been used to over the recent years, that got shut down completely. So YouTube is still actively stomping on anyone that's really pushing against a narrative. But at the same time, I wanted to point out that this seems to be only certain people or certain grades of channel. You've got to have a certain number of subscribers and views and all that kind of stuff. In other words, are you a potential influence risk to the official narrative? Whereas somebody like myself, I haven't had any videos removed. Yeah, I've been checking each week and looking down the list of the last however many episodes I've done. They're all still there, which is why I made the point earlier of repeating the phrase COVID-19 multiple times, because I want to point out the reality that there seems to be this situation similar to what I was talking about the rabbits earlier, where if you're a small channel and they can easily cul-de-sac and shadow ban you, so you get buried in the algorithm, which means the general public is very highly unlikely to ever come across your content. They actually prefer to keep you there because, one, it can give them the excuse of saying, oh, we're not deleting everyone. Look, these channels are still there. It can also give them the ability to monitor the general populace's reaction to certain things that are being implemented. So similar to what I was trying to describe earlier, where I was saying how they use us like the rabbits, they release us and allow us to find the holes in the fences. They're doing similar now with this situation. They put out a news blitz in the mainstream media where they're saying things like, oh, we're going to do this and we want you to do this, that, and the other. And then they monitor the social media reaction to those suggestions and they adjust their script, their narrative, their agenda to match the way the public reacts. So what we're doing here is part of their monitoring system, which is why I wanted to point that out for people. So please don't be naive about the way this structure works. It is, I feel, not unusual for the fact that I can sit here and talk about things like COVID-19 is bullshit. They are implementing martial law. There has been an outbreak of eugenics and what could simply be called genocide over the past several months, certainly several years, if you go back to the beginnings of the whole recession bullshit. I can say all this stuff and I'm not getting shut down. My videos are not being deleted. So it creates a counter narrative of people being censored, and it gives some of the public the illusion that, oh, there's nothing to see here. When these people are saying that free speech is being shut down and people are being censored and information, it can't be true because look, there's these people here talking about. Please be aware that the system actually wants to monitor your reaction to things. This is why for years now I've somewhat limited what I put online. Limited in the sense of I don't put tons of personal details about myself or my life. I'm not blogging every day saying, hey, here's me in the shop, here's me down the park, here's me doing this, that. No, because that's feeding them information about what's happening and my reactions in my life. They want that data from us. And I'm not saying this to try and suggest that you shouldn't be sharing information and talking with each other, not at all. But be aware that they actually want your information from you. It's like they throw a stone in the pebble in the pool of the public consciousness, and then they watch the ripples and they adjust their narrative writing based on the ripples of how we all react. So if you want them to take more notice that the public don't put up with this shit, keep talking about how it's all bullshit and we're not going to take it anymore. Yeah, that will slow them down at least. Hopefully, as the information spreads and more people start becoming aware of the complete bullshit and the lie, etc., it will prove to the system that they can't get away with implementing the level of tyranny that they're trying to, because too many people can see it for what it is. Too many people have put on the glasses. Yeah, so speaking out against this stuff is required. It's required voluntarily if you choose to. But at the same time, be aware that certain things we talk about, the ideas we come up with, actually help them in their construction. They need
defenses.
to know what we figured out and what we do or don't know, things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And we said that for a while anyway. But it's like a double-edged sword, isn't it? You've got to give the information out and let people hear what you've got to say.
But
hopefully,
I think it helps explain some of why some things, some channels, some personalities are being scrubbed from the internet. But a lot of the kind of general conversation is still allowed because they want us to field their next ball that they kick onto the field. So like the lockers, that story about the possible child trafficking in the lockers, they want us to pick that up and run with it and make a whole game out of it so that then they can broadcast that game through the mainstream media to the rest of the public. Yeah. Be careful about not feeding them the very justification that they use to then attack us with, giving them ammunition, basically.
Yeah. But we still keep doing it because that's what we do.
Again, it's why I like that 5-minute clip of the iconic podcast monologue.
Yeah.
You don't need to get into excessive detail about your own life, your own personal experiences, the information you have access to still be able to point out the contradictions, the hypocrisies, the lies, and help people see those kind of questions and realize that just with a few simple questions, their whole narrative gets blown out of the water and it gets revealed to be what it is, a lie, a propaganda lie being perpetuated against the public.
Yeah.
I've put the link in the chat room. It's uploaded on a different channel. This was from the Daily Syndicate, and they've titled it "The Fall of the Republic is the Rise of the Corporation Wake Up."
Cool.
So, but it's the same thing that you just said. So I put the
Great.
link in there. I've put other various other links on there, people. So please go and have a look at what gets up. What gets put up and share if you care.
Yeah.
Maybe we should make mandatory glasses. Hang on, let's find me day leaf glasses. Yeah, we should all get a pair of mandatory glasses. Put on the glasses, otherwise we'll have to beat each other in an alley.
Now
for
you
the
can
next
see
20
me.
minutes. Yeah. But there's a lot more of that happening there, and that, I mean, on the channel I was looking at it on the iconic podcast on his own channel. That's now up to 36,000 something views. When I first saw it yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, it only had about 20,000.
Go on.
It's rapidly ramping up, which means that's great. That means people are sharing it.
Yeah. And it's a simple message because it's just simple. It's just, people can see just the basics of the lie and everything. And yeah, it's a saying no thing. Just be brave and don't be scared. Don't feel like, you've got to always comply to this thing and think, well, I know some people who are actually ill and they're wearing a mask. And you think, why are you wearing a mask?
Yeah.
You're not well. You don't have to. You just say, no, I'm not. I can't breathe, or I've got a lung problem. Fuck off. Don't say fuck off. You might get thrown out, but you know what I mean? Just, usually think about what you're saying as well, because sometimes it can create, once you use this, they'll use everything against you now, bad language and everything. Oh, you're being aggressive. No, I'll have to throw you out.
Swear. They can
Yeah.
say I fucking swear if they fucking want to.
But that's how they react, though, isn't it? So it depends on the situation.
That guy's name is called Jeremy Elliott, from the iconic podcast, breaks it down, and he's also got an Instagram account. If you click on that link that I've placed in the chat, people in the chat room, in the description box, there's an Instagram account that you can go find this guy. But yeah, he does talk a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And we're going to give a big shout out to Vernon Coleman.
Yeah, should I play that now?
Yes.
Opportunity to play that now.
Yeah. Denny, if you're still there.
If it's still up.
Dr. Vernon Coleman, yes. Please go sub to his YouTube channel. He's doing great work.
Yeah.
And I'll also place the link and the title. It's called Anything. Is there anything they won't do?
And again, he approaches it from the way of making the ideas and the information easy to understand for the mass of the public. So you don't need scientific knowledge and jargon and all that kind of stuff. He makes simple points using, simple language, just explaining the point of view in a easy to understand way. I'm not trying to say he's making it too simple. He's not at all. Yeah, but it's avoiding that kind of overcomplication that puts off a lot of the general public. They don't want to spend the time trying to figure out the scientific details.
He is a doctor, so you know the guys knows what he's talking about. Right, I'll shut up now.
Okay, I'm going to mute myself and I'll play his video and we can all listen in.
Now the Gestapo are calling themselves public health officials. The name is the only discernible difference. They can come to your home, and if they see a child playing in the garden or riding a bicycle up and down your road, they can take the child away to be tested, assessed, and isolated. The parents don't need to be there. Their permission is not required. Their child can be legally kidnapped and removed if the public health official thinks they might, note the word might, be infected. It's the same for us all, of course. We're living in a totalitarian world. Boris Johnson, who's been playing a pantomime buffoon for years, has led a coup that should eventually land him and his war criminal colleagues in prison. We have a truly evil government. They aren't removing the last vestiges of our freedom for our benefit. The disease against which this is directed is becoming less of a problem as each day goes by. I seem to have been saying it forever, but this was never more deadly than the flu. Johnson and co. aren't actually lining us to be shot if we fail their stupid test, but maybe that'll be next. Nothing now seems impossible. And all this, remember, is happening as the infection becomes ever less of a threat. All around the world, deaths from all causes are now lower than average for the time of year. And more doctors are actually finding the courage to speak out and tell the truth. One doctor's even offered $5,000 to anyone who can produce evidence that the damned virus actually exists. I don't know how much Johnson and his cabinet know about the plan to take over the world, but I suspect they don't know all that much. I wonder if there's anyone in the UK cabinet important enough to be allowed into the cabal with which the United Nations is planning a world takeover. Still, that doesn't alter the fact that this latest piece of trickery is pure, unadulterated evil, and the rest of the House of Commons might as well not exist. I haven't heard many MPs protesting about human rights, freedom and democracy. As long as they get their fat salaries and their expenses, they don't give a damn about us. You wouldn't think MPs worked for us, would you? Have you noticed how so few of our so-called leaders have any statesman-like qualities? They all look as if they were put together in the dark and in a hurry by someone who couldn't understand the instructions because they were written in Japanese. Having us kidnapped and dragged off to secret locations for no good reason isn't Comrade Boris's only new innovation. It seems that bonking Boris has now gone completely barking, for he is apparently going to insist that we all wear masks whenever he tells us to. I suspect that Comrade Sturgeon is as potty as a damp kilt, but Boris is now thinking of following her mad example north of the border in Scotland and making face masks compulsory in shops and wherever else he fancies. Boris, like Sturgeon, appears to be following the revised advice given by the World Health Organization, I've lost track, now seemingly majority owned by the Mara Hindley and Ian Brady Foundation. Sorry, that was a simple mistake to make. I meant, of course, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There is, let me remind you, no unequivocal evidence that masks help prevent the spread of anything other than bits of food from messy eaters. But there is evidence that they kill. And there's evidence that if you wear one for a while, your blood oxygen levels are likely to fall to a dangerously low level. The only other explanation for this piece of official lunacy is that our government, like many governments around the world, wants us dead. The people who give in and wear masks are not only simple-minded, but they are clearly suicidal. The hypoxia that masks cause can be deadly. Everything seems to be getting madder by the day. If this were not a plot to deprive us of every morsel of our independence and our freedom, the government in the UK would now be arresting the idiots who produced and promoted the lunatic predictions which led to the lockdowns and the social distancing. Professor Ferguson, like bats and seagulls, appears to be a member of a protected species. Why hasn't he been arrested for producing the most egregiously incorrect forecast in the history of forecasts? And why haven't all the government's advisors been sacked and thrown into the Tower of London? Everywhere I look, there is more madness. Not content with attempting to do away with cash, there is now talk that they want to get rid of credit cards and debit cards so that everything we purchase goes through an app on our phone. I know the red fascists will applaud this, and I'm sure the entire staff of the BBC will be on their feet applauding, but they don't count as human beings. The government has generously opened the pubs, though there was never any reason to shut them, but they made it impossible for owners to make a profit or for punters to have any fun. So the pubs will slowly close, and the government can say it's not their fault because they tried. And then there's the social distancing. Instead of playing Simon Says, we're now all playing Boris Says, but this is now no party game. It's clear that social distancing was developed by the CIA as a form of torture, and it's known that it causes depression, poor sleep, impaired brain function, reduced immunity to infection, poor heart function, and so on and on and on. Following social distancing rules is said to double the risk of death and to be equivalent to being obese, smoking 15 fags a day, and being an alcoholic. Children who are forced to follow social distancing rules will grow up severely damaged. They will never recover. And yet children are far more at risk of injury or death by traveling to school than because of the coronavirus. The CDC in America reckons that the COVID-19 risk to those under the age of 19 is as near as damn it to zero. No child has passed the coronavirus to an adult. Asymptomatic individuals don't seem to pass on the infection, even if they have it. There was never any need to close schools or to introduce any social distancing nonsense. Why the hell are teachers demanding daft and destructive rules for children? In my view, any teacher who refuses to go to work until social distancing is introduced should be fired. When social distancing was first widely introduced about 70 years ago, it was regarded as the ideal way to break down prisoners. It caused more damage than beating them or starving them. Prisoners of war have said that they felt that social distancing and isolation were as bad as any physical abuse. There's no doubt that social distancing is a cruel and inhuman thing to do. Indeed, it's a war crime. And where did they get the 6 feet distancing from? Out of somebody's head, apparently. Allegedly, mad scientists felt that the British people wouldn't know what 1 meter was, and so they doubled it just for fun, from 1 meter to 2 meters, which is 6 foot 6 inches. And the sick joke is that social distancing actually increases the spread of illness. And social distancing in schools is a form of child abuse. Because of masks and social distancing, we'll never acquire immunity to disease. Our immune systems will deteriorate, and we'll never acquire herd immunity. By the way, forget what I said about school teachers just being sacked. That's not enough. They should be arrested and tried for child abuse if they insist on social distancing in schools. The government's advisors in the UK keep saying that we can't stop social distancing. They don't say why. But my fear is that the government's just keeping people terrified until the damn vaccine is ready. The UK government has already ordered 65 million syringes and needles, and one drug company is already making a vaccine that hasn't yet been properly tested. Remember that Vallance, the chief scientific advisor to the UK government, used to work for GlaxoSmithKline, a big vaccine manufacturer, and that Dr. Whitty, the chief medical officer in the UK, did research that was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In my view, both of them should be fired for having a potential conflict of interest. Incidentally, I see that Mr. Gates, the self-appointed doctor to the world, has allegedly said that singing, laughing and talking can all spread COVID-19. I hesitate to suggest this, but maybe Mr. Gates should stop talking for a few years so that we might all be safer. Meanwhile, we're now living in an occupied country. Everyone not already a member needs to join the resistance movement. If the public health officials come for you, don't resist with violence, of course, but I suggest that you film everything or ask someone to film everything. Then send the film to as many people as you know and write down details, including names and times, and tell the official that you will sue them personally for kidnapping you. When they tell you that they're immune because they're acting for the state, remind them that at the end of World War II, that was not considered an acceptable defense at the war crimes tribunals. Thank you for watching An Old Man in a Chair, and thank you for all your support and encouragement. Please copy and share the videos on Twitter, Facebook, BitChute, and wherever else. If you'd like to put on a translation, that would be great. If my videos disappear, please go to my website, www.vernoncoleman.com, to find out where you can see them, or at least to read the transcripts. The transcripts of the banned ones are all on my website too. This channel hasn't been monetized. I haven't authorized any advertising, and there is no sponsorship. If you'd like to see more videos from me, please subscribe to my channel, because the videos aren't always easy to find. If you visit mainstream media, please put on a note asking people to visit the Vernon Coleman channel on YouTube. Although it may feel like it at times, please remember you're not on your own. More and more people are waking up, and together we will win this fight. And remember, distrust the government, avoid mass media, fight the lies. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Vernon, for
Well said. Yeah.
wording it so well and speaking out. Please go and check his channel out, folks, if you choose to, so you can see the content directly from him and subscribe to his channel. And check his website as well, because I've noticed like YouTube is just deleting videos. Now they've got the habit that it's not even like it used to be, where they'll send you a warning letter and say, you know, your video's been suspended and stuff like that. It doesn't work like that anymore. Now you just look at your channel and the video's gone. They didn't even tell you, they just deleted it. But he always keeps all the transcripts for his monologues that he does in the videos. They're all on his website. So yeah, some of the other ones that I've mentioned before, like the one I think it's called "This Is a War" or "We Are at War," something like that, because that got deleted, but the transcript for it is still on his website. Yeah, and some of the points he raised, yeah, again, just some simple observations to point out how back to front, inverted, contradictory a lot of this stuff is. And for some of the people that are still being tempted into going along with it and even supporting it, similar to what I was talking about earlier when like Goethe was showing the screen share of that latest Corbett video talking about Goethe and the treatise on obedience and tyrants. Yeah, they manipulate people through tempting them with benefits. And when the potential future situation is such that for the mass of the population, general normality, the usual liberties that you become accustomed to, that you grew up with, are going to be taken away. And the only way to be allowed to have them back again is if you're on one of their kind of essential worker lists, if you're going along with the narrative. So it's social engineering through financial pressure and peer pressure, etc. But they're the kind of people that Goethe was talking about. They're getting tempted into going along with it because they think they're getting some kind of benefit out of it. You know, they're securing a benefit for themselves, i.e. the liberty to live a normal life, while the rest of us are all in the abnormal existence. But in the long run, as proven at the Nuremberg trials, and it's proven again and again throughout history, claiming, I'm just doing my job, mate. I'm just doing it because the government told me I had to. All that kind of excuse will not be justified. There is no justification to it. And this is why I think it was last week I was talking about this kind of thing. This is why I've argued that the reasoning why they're using deliberately ambiguous language, because then you can't hold Boris Johnson culpable and liable and take him to trial like Nuremberg, because he can just turn around and say, well, they were just suggestions and we were only relaying to you what the best science told us, these scientific experts that we consulted who told us exactly what we wanted them to. But in a legal sense, you can't hold him liable because he wasn't the one that actually laid hands on you and dragged you off to a quarantine camp where you were forcibly assessed and injected, etc. No, it wasn't him. So he's not guilty. This is classically how they set up a dictatorial regime, so that those in power that are actually creating the diktats can't face prosecution, because there's that ambiguous language bridge that leads to the enforcer, the people who are supporting the narrative and going along with it because they think they get some kind of benefit or profit out of it. They're the ones making the choice to actually enact the tyranny. So classically, as we've talked about many times in the past, the order followers, they're the ones that create the tyranny. The usurpers that sit at the top of the tree or near the top of the tree, faces like Bill Gates, etc. They're not the ones actually enacting the tyranny. They're creating it, they're fueling it, they're justifying it, they're creating a narrative to justify it. But the people at the end of that chain of command are the ones that actually cause it to happen.
Billy Gates has no medical training whatsoever, and bear that in mind that him and his company actually create viruses. So there you go. And also, please, that if you have a look at any kind of article on there, I looked at a BBC article the other day, and in there, it's the wording that they use. Like 1 minute they're saying it's a bug, then it's a virus, then it's a disease, and then it's a deadly virus, then it's a deadly disease. And it was like, well, you can't even make up your mind what it is. Just ignore that, please. So yeah,
others have said,
you see what I mean?
They can't even isolate it to prove it. They can't satisfy the Cox postulate. They can't show you a image of it. They can only ever show you a mock-up, or they can show you what they think the statistics or the diagnostics indicate, not actually outright isolate it and present it to you on a slide and say, here it is, look at it, you can actually see it. Which is why I know, I get why it fuels a lot of the argument about it being just completely fictitious right from the beginning, But I think that's an argument that they themselves are playing on. They know for the mass of the public that have been brought up in the standardized education system, they have an automatic bias that's been programmed into them, entrained into them, a la Pavlov and Skinner, etc., that you just accept what the academics say as being accurate because that's why they're the academics. They're the scientists, they're the experts. So if they say it is, you just accept it and move on. So for a majority of the public, if you try to come up to them and say, well, actually, they can't even prove the virus exists, it might not exist at all, they'll just react with the usual kind of dismissal of, oh, you're one of those crazy tinfoil hatters. Look, all the scientists say it's real, so of course it's real. It's like the green agenda and anthropogenic global warming and all that shit. They're relying on people's built-in biases, their cognitive biases, where they've been programmed to just accept what the academia or what the media says the academia are claiming about this situation. I should be more accurate with that, because I know there are a lot of academics and scientists that are speaking out about it. So I don't want to tar every scientist with the same bullshit brush. But the way it's been presented by the media is, oh, it's real. You can't deny it. Of course it's real. It does this. It does that. Look, you got to keep 6 feet apart. Whereas in reality, when you really drill down on those questions, they can't provide any proof, any evidence. And again, it leaves it open to ambiguity, so they can just make shit up as they go along. Oh, now the COVID gives you sweaty toes. If you've got sweaty toes, you must have COVID. If you get hunger after sundown, you must have COVID. If you feel tired after exercise, that's COVID.
Just sticking your head outside the door can infect the entire street. It's ridiculous.
Loose farts sink populations.
Yeah.
It's a wonder they haven't suggested that we have to wear sanitary towels, like everyone, not just obviously women when they're menstruating. Or no, everyone has to wear a sanitary towel to block your farts from spreading the virus. But antiviral butt plugs. Somebody's probably already producing them. Maybe we could say Bojo is an antiviral butt plug.
Yeah.
There you go. There's a marketing possibility for somebody. Get some butt plugs and superimpose Bojo's face on it and just call it the antiviral protector. Stop you projecting gas at everyone like Bojo does. Well, I just noticed that he's just coming up to the time now. So I will wrap it up at that. I think we've covered a fair bit of stuff. Maybe a bit just sort of generalized this week. As I said, I didn't feel that there was any kind of major thread to point out. I didn't think so. I'm sure I'm probably missing stuff. Of course I am. But from my point of view, I didn't spot anything beyond the usual narrative. There's been a few distraction stories. There's been a few wild rabbits released onto the internet to drag people's attention and stuff like that. But at the same time, the most important thing, I think, my opinion, the most important thing is that they are perpetuating the lie that this whole scamdemic is based on, claiming that it is a deadly pathogenic epidemic, pandemic, and that everybody is so at risk that we have to radically restructure society, which includes all the various shit which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
That is... We're now in the middle of the year. We're past the middle of the year. This is guaranteed not going to stop. It's going to carry on into the winter for the second wave, the spikes, the localized lockdowns, etc., which means you're going to carry on being fed this narrative for at least another, probably the year. Think about it, because the winter season doesn't end until March, April, the spring equinox. So from here till then, several months that you've got to go to work through this. So expect the pile of bullshit to build and build and build and build, because they're going to keep piling it on to try and drive this agenda home. But the more you keep saying, no, thank you, go fuck yourself, then the more they're going to realize that not enough people are buying their bullshit, so they can't get away with implementing it yet. We keep pushing back against that. And as Vernon says, more people are awakening, more people are waking up to this bullshit. So the more we keep talking about it and speaking out about it and sharing information and sharing evidence with each other, etc., the more likely it is that they're not going to get away with it. Hold them culpable and liable if we can. But for now, I feel anyway, it's my point of view again, the most important thing is to just push back against it to try and prevent it happening, or at the least to slow it down to such a degree that the rest of the population can catch up, kind of thing. Yeah, anyway, enough monologuing and ranting. thanks for everyone in the chat for joining in. Malevolence, hello. Malevolence.
Yeah, just in a lineage there of Boris in the chat there. If you flick up there, there's where Boris's linkages are to. Is it Mary's Queen of Scots there? I just missed that. Just changed.
He's also one of the Bullingdon boys. Look that up. Anybody?
Yeah, Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots. Yeah, lineage. Interesting.
I found it, I think.
There it is.
Boris lineage, Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, 13th century, great grandmother Edward, or 13th great grandmother, sorry, Edward I, King of England, 23rd, 23rd great grandfather Henry VIII, King of England, 24th great grandfather. Yeah, he's well entwined into their nepotistic eugenics houses.
They're not there by accident, are they?
No.
Selected, not elected.
Yes.
And Canau, hello. And Bright 77, hello. And Sonia White, hello. And I'm not sure if I saw anyone. JB, hello. So I was just having a quick scroll up because I know I saw a few people join towards the end. Manas Moore, hello. And Ben's there. He made it home eventually. I hope you're all right, mate. Join us on Wednesday. We can carry on talking about all this stuff. Well, I think I've scrolled up as far as I can. I'll scroll back down again. Thanks again, folks, for joining in the chat. If you do, thanks for just tuning in and listening. Share, like, all that kind of, the way this internet.
Share, like, subscribe.
Yeah. Thanks all. Cheers, Cookie.
Cheers, everyone, and thank you please share our links around and look them up. Send them to whoever you think might benefit from them. And cheers. Thank you for everybody that's contributed to the chat. We do appreciate you.
Thanks for sharing the links, Taz, like you do.
That's okay.
It helps a lot. We Mad Mental Me just joined in the chat. Hello. Right, yeah. See you again Wednesday night for the reality chat on the Reality Chat channel at 8 p.m. UK time. Please go and check out. There's lots of other good stuff out there. Steve to Goose on Thursday night mystery show at 8 p.m. again. And yeah, there's loads of stuff. There's loads of people still talking about this stuff. And as I was saying earlier, yes, some channels are getting shut down, but it's not stopping the conversation. People are diversifying onto many other platforms. Thanks to Mascara Snake, sent me a comment saying there's a new platform called Brand New Tube. I think, is it pronounced Brand New Tube? Basically, it's like a clone of YouTube. Where they say they're not going to shut you down or remove your stuff. So there's another platform opened up that people can make use of.
Yeah.
So, yeah, good stuff. Thanks again, folks. We'll leave it at that. Cat cheese. I'm going to click the button.